It was late at night and he was alone. He'd been fast asleep when a loud noise outside had roused him, sending his dogs into a barking frenzy. He looked out of his window and spotted a man staring back at him. Motionless, expressionless. England midfielder stared at him. "What do you want?" he shouted out his window, but there was no reply. The man just kept staring. Even in his own home, he no longer felt safe. If David Beckham didn't know it before, he knew it now. He was without question the most hated man in England, and all because of a flick of the leg. En route to Toulon, Beckham spent most of his time on his phone. His fiancée Victoria Adams had some news for him. She was pregnant with their first child. Everything, it seemed, was falling into place after what had been a difficult start for Beckham at France '98. At the tender age of 23, David Beckham was already a two-time Premier League champion, playing in all but one of Man United's 97-98 title-winning season. And for England, he was an important cog in Glen Hoddle's midfield, playing every minute of England's table-topping World Cup qualifying campaign. However, Beckham found himself on the bench for England's opening two games in Group G. Tottenham's Darren Anderson had been preferred on the wing by Hoddle against Tunisia and Romania, with reports suggesting that Hoddle was unimpressed by Beckham's continued presence on the UK tabloids' front page.
At the time that he would be playing a big part in the World Cup, and he'd be disappointed, but at that time he wasn't focused.
Beckham was engaged to Spice Girls singer Victoria Adams and was the star of an unstoppable Manchester United side. He'd already been scrutinised for his lack of discipline, for wearing a sarong, and for his ongoing issues with Alex Ferguson, who found it difficult to understand Beckham's life off the pitch. Glen Hoddle's England went into the tournament hopeful of a decent run. The last thing Hoddle wanted was one of his players to not perform at the absolute peak of their abilities, and since Beckham was already expecting news of pregnancy, he thought best leave him on the bench for safekeeping. Darren Anderson was preferred on the wing, as England cruised to a 2-0 win over Tunisia. However, following a shock defeat to Romania, who went on to top the group, Beckham was drafted back in for the crucial group game against Colombia, where only a win for England would guarantee them moving into the next round. Beckham wasted little time in announcing his presence at France 1998, with a trademark goal from a 30-yard free kick. Beckham was lauded as a hero by the tabloids and fans alike, as England escaped the scathing that they would have gotten from the media if they went out of the World Cup early. In the round of 16, England faced Argentina. There was already a lot of bad blood between the two sides, and plenty of tension due to the Falklands War, one that saw Argentina and British arms fight it out over two British territories in the South Atlantic. England was still hurting from the infamous hand of God goal by that Diego Maradona, who had scored against them in the quarterfinals of the 1986 World Cup. While England sought vengeance, Argentina's players weren't all as pumped up. As midfielder Matías Almeida put it, a kind of El Clasico has been created around England versus Argentina matches because of the Falklands War. But the real El Clasico is when we play Brazil. His skipper, tireless midfield enforcer Diego Simeone didn't agree. Quite apart from the political history, the desire of the whole country is to defeat England. Adidas's pre-match promo, accompanied by the imagery of Beckham, proved to be prophetic in a different way than he ever intended. After tonight, England versus Argentina will be remembered for what a player did with his feet. It said, referencing Diego Maradona's 1986 Hand of God. In a game punctuated with fouls and dirty play, Argentina came out guns a-blazing. Gabriel Batista converted a penalty in just the 5th minute of the game, as Argentina took the lead. England needed a quick response and hit back with a penalty of their own on 10 minutes after Michael Owen was brought down in the box. Alan Shearer made no mistake from 12 yards, then after 6 minutes, 18-year-old wonder kid Michael Owen produced a career-defining moment as he split through the defence with a drop of the shoulder and slammed it past the Argentine keeper, giving England a 2-1 lead. But shortly before half-time, parity was restored, as Javier Zanetti equalised for Argentina. England knew they needed to go all out in the second half, but within 2 minutes of the restart, England were down to 10 men. Beckham, who had been continually pressed and troubled by Simeone, unleashed his frustration with a kick out at the Argentine midfielder and was shown a red card for his indiscretion. Beckham sobbed uncontrollably as he sat in the dressing room, watched his team play out the remainder of the game with 10 men. England held on valiantly. The game went on to extra time, with both sides coming close to scoring, but neither team finding the net. After a nervy penalty shootout, England succumbed on penalties. The Manchester United winger was the perfect scapegoat. 10 heroic lions and 1 stupid boy was how Piers Morgan's Daily Mirror put it. 2 days later, it published a full-page David Beckham dartboard with Beckham as the bullseye, surrounded by unpopular figures including Argentina's leader during the Falklands War, referee Kim Milton Nielsen, and Jeremy Beadle. Beckham would spend little more than an hour back on English soil upon the squad's return from France, flying by Concorde to meet Victoria in New York. Even that hour offered him a glimpse of what lay ahead. Chased through Heathrow Airport by the media, how does it feel to let your country down? One reporter asked him. Do you realise what you've done? Beckham just kept walking. Angry fans hung lifelike sculptures wearing David Beckham's shirt and an infamous sarong on lampposts. These were burnt. He received death threats and even bullets in the post. It was a shameful display from English fans and the press alike, turning on one of their stars of the team due to one moment of madness. Beckham later claimed that he felt let down by Glen Hoddle and the English footballing administration for not being there for him during the toughest time in his career.
It was probably the toughest moment in my career. I was having death threats. I never felt safe for 3.5 years.
However, Beckham was unwavered by the reaction of his fellow countrymen continuing to plough through. Backed by Manchester United fans who seemed to prefer club over country and saw Beckham as one of their own. David Beckham produced his greatest season to date for the Red Devils, having 15 goal contributions for Manchester United in 34 league games. He went on to become second in the Ballon d'Or rankings and helped Manchester United to their historic treble. He also engraved his name among the world's elite. English fans also started to see him as a football icon, slowly but surely, as he worked his way through the national side, ending his career with 115 caps for England, the third highest.